Hello and welcome to New Orleans, Louisiana. Today we're climbing aboard the inaugural service of Amtrak's Mardi Gras. For the first time in nearly 20 years, passenger trains are rolling along the Gulf Coast. Today we're among the first riders aboard Amtrak's brand new Mardi Gras, linking New Orleans to Mobile, Alabama. From bayou marshes to sweeping Gulf views, this inaugural journey is more than just a train ride, it's a piece of history in the making. So grab your beads and let's celebrate. It's time for Amtrak's Mardi Gras. Our journey begins here at New Orleans Union Passenger Terminal. Opened in 1954, Union Passenger Terminal is the second Union station to serve New Orleans, the previous station located just west of the current facility. Union Passenger Terminal serves as the southern terminal for three of Amtrak's long-distance services, the Crescent to New York, City of New Orleans to Chicago, and Sunset Limited to Los Angeles. Of course, that 3 is about to jump to 4, as today marks the inaugural service of Amtrak's Mardi Gras. The twice-daily service from New Orleans to Mobile will end an almost 20-year suspension of service on the Gulf Coast, with trains canceled following Hurricane Katrina in 2005. New Orleans Union Passenger Terminal is an interesting post-war structure with a relatively simple layout. The station includes waiting areas for both bus and train passengers, with ticket desks for each found below a mural depicting Louisiana and New Orleans. Business and sleeper passengers departing New Orleans gain access to the Magnolia Room, an exclusive quiet waiting room with a few light snacks and drinks. For a first day of service, there really isn't much in the way of fanfare here in New Orleans. There's a few news crews, a mix of Amtrak employees, and a whole host of transit nerds and rail fans waiting to get on board. Out on the tracks, our train sits waiting. Formed of 3 coaches and 2 locomotives, the Mardi Gras is a relatively low-capacity train, a fact not helped by the suspension of Amtrak's Horizon coaches earlier this year. Also out on the tracks is Amtrak's American View. This Viewliner 1 car body has been entirely retrofitted with a rear-facing theater layout and a massive window. The car gives Amtrak executives and engineers a clear view out of the tracks behind for better inspection and analysis. About 20 minutes before departure, the first boarding announcement is made for Train 24, Amtrak's Mardi Gras. Ticket in hand, it's time to head out to the platform and climb aboard Amtrak's newest service. As mentioned, our train is formed of 3 coaches, sandwiched between 2 Siemens ALC-42 locomotives. The coaches include an Amfleet 1 Business Cafe car and 2 Amfleet 2 long-distance coach cars. Ascending the stairs, we find a seat on the right side of the train, and before we know it, we're pulling away from New Orleans. The Mardi Gras service heads east out of New Orleans and across the border with Mississippi. The service makes intermediate stops in Bay St. Louis, Gulfport, Biloxi, and Pascagoula before crossing into Alabama and heading north to Mobile. The Mardi Gras route covers a total of 145 miles with a travel time of 3 hours and 43 minutes. The departure from New Orleans isn't anything spectacular, but don't worry, as the scenery gets pretty dang good about 30 minutes into the journey. Trains out of Union Terminal pass the Superdome, with those heading east wrapping around the north side of Greenwood Cemetery. I mentioned grabbing a seat on the right side of the train, as that's the side which faces the Gulf towards Mobile, and thus will have the best views on the ride to Alabama. Train follows the tracks of the Crescent through most of New Orleans, but just before crossing under I-10, the Mardi Gras breaks north, becoming the first passenger train to traverse these tracks in 20 years. We cross back over the Crescent's line north before we bid farewell to New Orleans. Before we get to the marshlands of the Gulf Coast, let's take a look at our Amfleet 2 seats. As with all of Amtrak's coach fleet, Amfleet 2s are laid out in a standard 2x2. Each seat offers an amazing 2 to 2.5 feet of legroom, with space beneath the next row for smaller bags. Each seat includes a footrest, which folds down from the seat back. Typically, footrests are unusable for taller individuals, but the chasm of space provided on Amfleet 2s means we can actually enjoy the footrest. The seatback pocket is the same as any other on Amtrak, inside of which is the safety information card. The tray table folds down from the seat in front and extends outward towards the user. Above each row are 2 lights, activated by the buttons in between, and the usual 2 outlets are found on the wall below the windows. Amfleet 2 coach seats offer reclining seatbacks and adjustable leg rest for increased passenger comfort on longer journeys. The former is controlled by the button on the armrest, allowing it to recline quite far. The latter is controlled by both a ratchet and a release lever. The leg rest is quite long, leaving about 8 inches of space to the next row, and creates a comfortable relaxing or sleeping position when combined with the recline of the seat back. For a little under 4 hours of journey time, these cars are amazingly comfortable. Amfleet 2s are typically reserved for long-distance overnight coach class, so to see them on a shorter intercity route is excellent. Now, their use is likely more down to necessity than choice, as all of Amtrak's Horizon coaches, the likely candidate for intercity services, were pulled from service earlier this year. Turning back to the window, suburban New Orleans has disappeared, replaced by an endless swath of green marshland dotted with mirror-like waterways. The high morning sun provides warmth to the serene bayou around us. Birds fly up from the reeds as our train trundles past, the water rippling where turtles duck their heads underwater. The flat landscape out here along the coast puts into perspective how easily a line like this can be flooded and washed away, and that's exactly what happened in August of 2005. Back before the turn of the century, the line to Mobile was once served by the Gulf Coast Limited, a daily intercity service which operated in 1984 and 85, and again in 1996 and 97. The Sunset Limited also served this line alongside the Gulf Coast Limited as it headed out to Florida and continued to do so after its termination, but that all changed in 2005. Hurricane Katrina made landfall in August of 2005, and the effects were devastating. Overshadowed by the tragedy in the surrounding area was damage to the track infrastructure along the Gulf. Service was suspended indefinitely following the hurricane, and although the tracks were repaired in 2006, CSX opted not to renew service. Since then, the Gulf Coast has been without a passenger train, and only now, 20 years later, is Amtrak bringing that wait to an end. Regalet's Pass is one of the widest waterways we'll cross today, the bridge here spanning 4,555 feet. While it's long, it's nothing compared to the nearly 2 miles of bridge we'll cross after our stop in Bay St. Louis. The tracks butt up against the Gulf Coast at Polecat Bend, the blue ocean water extending out as far as the eye can see. Pearl River marks our crossing into Mississippi, state 2 of 3 for the Mardi Gras. The scenic running ends as we reach the suburban area of Waveland and Bay St. Louis. An unfortunately placed truck on the tracks ahead of our sister train means we have to wait for it to make its stop in Bay St. Louis before we can continue on to our first stop. The first of our 3 intermediate stations is Bay St. Louis, and the community is out to welcome the first eastbound train. People are waving, news crews are filming, and everyone is happy to see the return of service to the Gulf Coast. It's a brief stop here to exchange a few passengers before we continue on, crossing the entrance to Bay St. Louis as we power east. It takes just 24 minutes and 15 miles to travel from Bay St. Louis to our second of 4 intermediate stops in Gulfport. As was the case at our first stop, we're greeted by Railfans, news crews, and community members alike. Another quick stop, and we're on our way again. Departing Gulfport, let's head down to the cafe car to grab a bite to eat. The cafe car on the Mardi Gras is located at the rear of the train. The half cafe, half business class car includes a few tables on one end for seating, a cafe bar in the middle, and 2x1 business class seating on the other. The cafe menu of the Mardi Gras features a few new items, some of which are locally sourced and exclusive to the train, each denoted by a fleur-de-lis. In addition to the usual suite of choices, Amtrak has added a muffaletta sandwich, pralines, Zapp's voodoo chips, moon pies, community coffee, a Beta lager, Chandelure IPA, and a hurricane cocktail. Now unfortunately, this first run of the Mardi Gras has a rather limited selection of cafe items, with Amtrak looking to gauge interest in each item before updating stock accordingly. I was looking to get the muffaletta sandwich, but that was sold out almost immediately, and not wanting to get something too sweet or alcoholic, I went with the sausage, egg, and cheese bagel and a cup of coffee. The bagel sandwich isn't the most visually appealing option, but it certainly tasted good. The breakfast sausage is peppery, pairing well with the savory cheese. The bagel is a little tough, a byproduct of the heating process, but overall the sandwich is pretty good. The coffee, on the other hand, left much to be desired. It was very watery and lacked flavor, which I'm sure is more down to the brewing process and less a comment on the coffee itself, but still, it wasn't great. For the $10.50 I paid with tip, it was a fine breakfast choice. Our third intermediate stop comes in Biloxi, the station here located just steps away from the Biloxi Transit Center, providing seamless onward travel for local passengers. Bathrooms on Amfleet 2 coaches are found near the boarding doors for each coach, with one regular and one accessible. The accessible bathroom is quite large, with the usual suite of sink, soap, and paper products located on the far end of the bathroom. 2 120-volt outlets are located beside the sink and appear to be in good working order. It's a fine bathroom and works well enough for anyone's needs. As is typical for intercity rail traffic, we're limited to 79 miles per hour, which, while not blisteringly quick, is fine for cruising on the coast. Now, 79 miles per hour is just under half as fast as a certain train set to enter service next week, Amtrak's next generation Acela, the Avelia Liberty. We'll be climbing aboard the inaugural train out of Boston, heading down the Northeast Corridor to Washington, D.C. in first class as we experience America's next generation of high-speed trains. It's a journey you won't want to miss, so hit subscribe now to be alerted when that video goes live on Saturday, August 30th. Our 79-mile-per-hour running is interrupted by a pit stop in Pascagoula. Pascagoula is home to Ingalls Shipbuilding, one of the most prominent shipyards in the United States. In addition to leading production of U.S. military ships, it's also the largest private employer in all of Mississippi. While Pascagoula has a nice station building, it's not for passenger service. The actual station, as is the case with most stations on the line, is a small mid-level platform with no shelter, a few benches, and a ramp to the parking lot. The depot is being turned into a Chandeleur brewery, the very same Chandeleur which produces the IPA you can buy on board. Leaving Pascagoula behind, we also leave the coastline to head inland, the coastal running replaced by a mix of forest and farmland. The Mardi Gras service may be a train, but it means much more to the Gulf Coast communities which it serves. Passenger service isn't just a mode of transportation, it's a sign of economic progress. Communities across the coast are now connected, the train bringing with it tourists and local travelers alike, all of whom bring money to spend, helping boost commerce along the line. The Mardi Gras service also shows that intercity rail is ever viable in the United States, with countless lines like this possible across the lower 48. Hopefully the Mardi Gras service will be a long-term success, and more states will see the value in expanding passenger rail to their communities. The industrial shipyards of Mobile, Alabama fill the window as we approach our eastern terminus. If you keep an eye out the right-hand window, you'll spot the SS United States, a 1950s steamship set to become an artificial reef in the coming months. The Mardi Gras slows to a crawl, and 4 hours after leaving New Orleans, the inaugural eastbound Mardi Gras service pulls to a stop at the end of the line. We're greeted here in Mobile by quite the crowd. News crews, local tourism representatives, and local brands have all shown up to welcome us into Mobile. It's a sea of smiling faces happy to see the train return to their city. I'm just as happy to be among the first to visit and make history along the Gulf Coast. With our journey now at an end, it's time to bring today's video to a close. I hope you enjoyed our ride on Amtrak's inaugural Mardi Gras service, marking the end of a 20-year hiatus for Gulf Coast passenger trains. It was amazing to see all of the communities along the way welcoming the train with open arms, and that scenery along the Gulf Coast makes this route really something special. Anyways, if you're new around here, I would really appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button down below. It's totally free and it really helps support the channel. I want to give a huge shout out and thank you to my loyal patrons and members. Y'all are amazing and your incredible generosity is, as always, greatly appreciated. If you too want your name in the video or just want to support the channel in more ways than one, then head on over to the links in the description below. But anyways, that's all I have for today. Thanks for riding with me, and I'll see you in the next one.